Welcome to the MrBoxingguru podcast. It is me, Sal, MrBoxingguru. Thank you, everyone, again for listening for tuning in. It is March 17th, the day after the big pay-per-view event, and we'll get to that later. We'll get to the main event later. Of course, big thank you. That intro that you guys just heard was from Los Anaya. Raul, Christian, Anaya, thank you so much. Big shout out to all you guys in Texas, where the big pay-per-view happened this week. Well, we'll get to that a little later. There's a lot to talk about. The main event, there was a lot of questions that were answered. I would love to get as much feedback from this podcast as possible, because there were so many answers that maybe even I thought that I had. Somehow this fight was supposed to defeat logic, and we should be better than that for thinking or believing in miracles. But yeah, we'll get to that in a bit. First, let's talk about what actually happened. March 16 at Cowboy Stadium on Fox pay-per-view. ARREOLA, first things first, the first fight that I saw, which was the ARREOLA that actually stopped Agustin in the third round. Decent opponent for ARREOLA. ARREOLA, of course, we know he's 38 years old. He only has a certain amount of fights that he could get to. There's some talk about him going again for a belt. Don't know necessarily for what. I think he had his chance in a bit of a weaker era when there was a two-headed monster in the division, which is the Klitschko's. And he wasn't able to get a belt there. Look, I love Chris to death, but I would love for him to fight fights at his level, sort of like the fights that just happened this weekend. Maybe something a little tougher. I mean, if anything, the toughest fight I would love to see Chris in is maybe versus an Andy Ruiz, another Mexican, another little husky Mexican. I think they'll make a great fight, and especially now that Andy's a PBC fighter, so why not? You have to make even fights. Maybe even a rematch with Tavern. I mean, as bad as Tavern looked, I mean, I think that's closer fight to being interesting. I mean, it's you got to be careful with guys at Chris's level. And again, I'm not knocking Chris at all. I think what he was able to do for heavyweight boxing, for especially as a Mexican American, I think it's great. Mexicans are not really supposed to be in the heavyweight or touch the heavyweight. We're just fat, but we're not supposed to be in the heavyweight division. So kudos to Chris. I really hope, I wish him all the best in his career. I hope his fights, him and his team. I know Henry still works with him, Henry Ramirez, great coach. I hope they match him well and not use him as a stepping stone. I know at this stage of his career, there's a lot of fighters that unfortunately take fights because of money. And I get it, because at the end of the day, this is prize fighting. But I hope they give him the right fights. Look, these guys are without Heyman. You know, the rumors are that Heyman pays their fighters very well. They fight very far in between, but they pay him well. So I really hope they take care of Chris, because Chris was one of the first Heyman fighters, if I remember correctly. So again, shout out to Chris. Shout out to his coach Henry. So wishing him all well. We saw the other fight that I actually saw in this pay-per-view was Love versus BENAVIDEZ, and a fight that BENAVIDEZ kind of slapped him around in the first round and ended up finishing him off in the second round. You know, ended up getting the stoppage. The referee went in there and stopped the fight. What happened to Love? Love was a decent fighter. He didn't have a bad record. I think he had 2 losses to his name. One of them was versus Kid Chocolate, which is understandably so. Kid Chocolate, of course, had a long layoff and somehow just comes and beats Love. Love was one of Mayweather's first fighters. But what happened to him? I don't know. I don't think he had a bad record. Again, it wasn't a bad name, especially for BENAVIDEZ after the long layoff. You know, we heard about the cocaine problem. You know, he took some time off, but I know the kid was active in the gym. I mean, you see all his posts and whatnot. So, good fight for BENAVIDEZ. Don't know what's going on with Love, if they're just going to start using him as an opponent. He's been used as an opponent in the last 2 fights. So I don't know, man. That's that Mayweather Promotions, man. You get the nice cars, you get everything else, but do you really get a legacy? I don't know. Ask Love. Uh, but now to the main event, and this is where it gets crazy because there were so many questions for Mikey. Mikey had, Mikey had the biggest balls and going up in weight, going two division, yeah, he actually went two divisions. He fought Broner, then he went to 135 again. Then he jumped to 47 to challenge the biggest monster in the welterweight division, which was a kid by the name of Errol Spence. Now, Mikey was supposed to defeat all odds. He was supposed to defeat that long jab this kid had. He was supposed to be more athletic than a kid like Spence. He was supposed to be stronger for some reason. He was supposed to be that much better than Spence. At least that's what Mikey sold us. Mikey Garcia made us believe in him. He said, I am that good. Look at what I did with this fighter. This is what I'm going to do at the welterweight division. I'm going to go and beat the man at welterweight. I'm going to go and beat the man at welterweight because I'm that much better. Many guys like Manny Pacquiao went up in weight. Guys like Oscar De La Hoya went up in multiple weights. Guys like Shane Mosley actually went from 135 to 147 to beat a guy like Oscar. And Mikey Garcia thought he could do the same. And again, Mikey Garcia is doing it in a weaker era, but Mikey Garcia is a really small guy. What did he start at? 122, 126, then 130, 35. My biggest concern was when I saw Mikey at the weigh-in, and he looked a little pudgy, man. He looked like a single mom on spring break, just little soft, it just things didn't look right. And especially for an athlete at that level. And I always wondered, okay, logic says that the bigger guy, a big great guy, does not get beat by a little great guy, unless there's something wrong. Now, through the last couple of weeks, I tried to decipher, okay, what is it that they see? What is it that the whole Garcia clan sees in this? Because Spence is a monster. There's a reason why these kids are avoiding him. He's not a sloppy fighter. Like you would say, okay, yeah, he's big, but he's clumsy. He's just gonna come forward. No, he's not a guy that just strictly imposes his will. This is a kid that could actually box. This is a kid that could actually pass on for a middleweight that could crack. What is it that the Garcias see in this? Did they see a kid from Texas with a decent fan base that could make a solid pay-per-view? Did they just see money? Did they say, you know what? I could hang with welterweights. I've been banging it out with welterweights. Win or lose, I make a lot of money. Did Mikey Garcia con the boxing community that's been behind him and RGBA for so many years? We all know that Mikey isn't been passionate about the sport, and you could tell sometimes in how a fighter fights. If a fighter fights for himself, Mikey, we all know, is a very strong fighter, very intelligent fighter. At the same time, we know Mikey is not a fighter that's going to throw a punch just to throw a punch. Mikey's going to throw a punch that he knows is going to land. Mikey is not just going to throw a jab just to throw a jab. If he throws a lazy punch, it's because something big is coming behind it. Spence, even Spence to a certain extent, he wasn't getting fooled by what Mikey was trying to do, by the traps that Mikey was trying to set up. Very intelligent kid. And to Spence's credit, he didn't go in there and use his size on Mikey. I mean, what I mean by size, he didn't impose himself. He wasn't on top of Mike. He wasn't just trying to put his body on him. No, on the contrary. He used his jab. He stayed away from him. He boxed Mikey Garcia in a fight that, I mean, you would think, okay, he's a bigger guy. He's just going to go in there and just muscle him up. He tried muscling him up a couple of rounds, and that was toward the later part of the fight where, again, though, don't quote me, but I think Robert even wanted to stop the fight at, I think it was the 9th or 10th round. And again, Mikey was never really seemed in danger, but he almost was just, it seemed that he was content in surviving. I mean, I think I found 2 rounds to give to Mike, and that was round 1 and 2, and that was me being very generous on the first round. On the second round, I think he won it convincingly. The first round was a feel out round, so honestly, it could have gone to either guy. But I think I at the heat of the moment, I gave it to Mikey. I didn't see anything land from Spence. I think he deflected most of the punches, but at the same time, I didn't see Mikey follow up with anything else. So again, what was it that Mikey saw? I don't think I've seen any interviews where Mikey said, okay, this is what I saw. I just heard something about saying he's good, but I'm just a tad bit better. What was it that Mikey was better at? He wasn't faster. He wasn't stronger. He didn't impose his game plan on him. Yes, he had Spence to a certain extent backing up, but that was not necessarily backing up. It was just, boxing circles around him. So what did we get from this fight? Again, in my opinion, it was the one of the biggest bank robberies since Floyd versus Manny, or and even Floyd versus Conor McGregor. I almost feel like, yes, you almost took advantage of the fact that you were in a win-win situation, because if you lose to this guy, you're supposed to lose. You're a smaller guy, and then you could just go and try to fight at 130, try to fight the Broners at 140. So what is it that we really got from this fight? Well, what was it that the Garcias really brought to the table besides a money grab? And again, I think the reason why I guess you could say I'm a little pissed, because I think even myself, I think I believed in Mikey. I said Mikey has a shot. I believe in what Mikey says. I mean, when had we ever seen Mikey in a difficult situation? I think the last time we saw Mikey in a difficult situation was the fight with Salido, where Robert stopped the fight, in my opinion, prematurely, because according to Robert, Mikey had broken his nose. Not necessarily. I do not necessarily know if it's true or not, but that's the story behind it. That Mikey broke his nose. Salido started turning it up again. Mikey had already dropped Salido like 4 or 5 times in that fight, but again, that was probably the toughest I seen Mikey in. I think Mikey got dropped once before, but again, that's it. There was really, I had never really seen Mikey in it. But you know what? I think it's almost unfair to say Mikey this, Mikey that. Let's talk about Spence. Let's talk about Spence following a legit game plan. A game plan that I think is going to serve. Is going to serve him well, because he boxed Mikey like if Mikey was a 160-pound monster. He kept him at the end of his jab. He stayed busy. He won arguably every single round. Like I said, I gave Mikey 2 rounds, but other than that, I thought Spence did a great job. But he boxed Mikey. He wasn't trying to go in there for the kill. He wasn't trying to go in there and get set up by something big by the little Mexican guy because again, Mike Spence, I'm sorry, was in a lose-lose situation. If he gets touched up by a little guy like Mikey, the Twitter trolls or the Twitter know-it-alls that are out there. Oh, he got exposed. Mikey Garcia exposed Spence, blah blah blah. So he wasn't trying to fall into anything stupid and make it a stupid, not yeah, I call it stupid argument. So stupid war into just a ballsy fight. He actually boxed him. He didn't again use his weight. He used his size, but he didn't necessarily use his weight to be on top of Mikey. And that was very impressive for the kid. I think after the fight was done, I think Spence kind of went at it and said some things to Oscar about Oscar not liking black fighters, or that he's not good to black fighters. And I think that's, I don't know. I think we're at a different stage in boxing where I don't think the color of your skin should determine how great you are. I think it's just your merit. I think Pacquiao is a prime example of who gives a shit what the color of your skin is. If you can fight, you can fight. The Filipino boxing community was never really that strong. As a matter of fact, if you try to talk boxing to a lot of Filipino guys, I remember back when Manny was fighting, they would only name Barrera and Morales, which are I guess rivals of Manny Pacquiao. But what I'm saying is that wasn't a strong boxing community, but the fact that the kid could fight, Manny Pacquiao in this case, that made it big. Golovkin, again, another fighter that just transcended race or flag. The kid could fight, so the kid had fans. Mike Tyson, I mean, shit. I mean, this guy was fighting overseas. This guy was fighting here, in a fight that we know was going to last 1 or 2 rounds, but somehow people were there, and it didn't matter if he was black or not. He was just a matter that he was one of the baddest sons of bitches ever. I think Chavez, Canelo. Look, Canelo's this guy that somehow refuses to even speak English, but somehow he sells all this, and you can just say, "Oh, it's Mexicans that are buying the paper." No. It's you go to fight night, you see every race, gender. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. So you can't blame it on race. And to even say that Oscar, doesn't like black fighters. I personally think it's crazy. I mean, you got to think about what I think when Golden Boy started. It was Bernard Hopkins, again, a guy that had beaten Oscar, and Shane Mosley that were brought in as partners. I think when Mosley ended up going to Top Rank, that kind of ended that. But still, again, he was part of Golden Boy. He was, again, black fighter and a hell of a fighter and a hell of a legend here in LA. Same thing with Hopkins. I mean, he's a living legend, and he's still part of Golden Boy. I know Golden Boy has, I think, yeah, they do have black fighters in the roster. Again, remember, Golden Boy, for the last couple of years, has been a very top heavy company where they have 1 or 2 really big names. In this case, Canelo, and the rest are developmental fighters. You got their farm system like the JoJo's that are coming out, and one of the Quigleys and whatnot. But I mean, they've been very top heavy. They only have 1 or 2 stars, but yeah, again, the whole race card. I don't bring it. Don't ruin it. Don't be that Clarissa Shields where you want to bring a race card. I think Errol Spence deserves a world right now. He deserves to be active. He's obviously a star. They sold a whole bunch of tickets, or at least that arena seemed packed. And I know Mikey Garcia has never really been a ticket seller. I know for this there was a lot of people that traveled, but at the end of the day, it takes 2 to tango. And I think between Mikey Garcia and Spence, they made it a hell of an event, and a hell of a. They put in a big crowd. They didn't put on a great show. While he Spence did, he boxed his way, but it wasn't a pay-per-view material. And that brings me back to my next case. Usually, when there's a pay-per-view fight, there's the biggest guy in the division versus the other guy in the division, especially now with so many sanctioning bodies, so many freaking belts, that you really don't know who's the real champ until somehow, some way, they actually meet. This wasn't it. A lot of times, again, these big fights, they tend to be boring because they're so close. They're so, I mean, you get the number one guy versus the number two guy, and they're both that good that it brings up controversial scorecards, controversial decisions, but it's that close. And that's what big pay-per-views a lot of times do. I mean, that's why they're so packed with so many fights, so many undercard fights, so many good underfight cards, that because the main event might be a bit lackluster. Again, this wasn't the case. This was a one-sided fight. I don't want to say one-sided beatdown because I don't think Mikey, he didn't get physically damaged. Yes, he got outboxed, but he wasn't physically damaged. He got outclassed. He definitely didn't get exposed because, again, Spence was that bigger guy. Again, he did that. He did a great job at his fight, but he didn't expose anything. He just outboxed Mikey Garcia. I know it might not make sense to a lot of folks. Hopefully it does, because I know that there's a lot of really good boxing fans that listen to me. But again, there was nothing. It was nothing. This fight did not deserve a pay-per-view. And I'll ask you guys this, and please respond to me whenever you guys get the chance, whether it's I know I get a lot of DMs about this stuff. Did this fight deserve pay-per-view in a time where everything is streamed? You got the Zone, you got ESPN Plus, you got streaming devices. Again, shout out to War Media. Did the fight merit the pay-per-view cost? At the end of the day, once this was all said and done, was a pay-per-view worth it to you? Did you say, when the bill comes, are you going to be like, oh man, you know what? I remember that fight. That shit was great. And with a smile on your face. When was the last pay-per-view that you actually said, you smiled and said, you know what? This shit was awesome. I'll buy this shit again if I had the chance to. I know Canelo versus GGG was decent undercard too. I think we had a knockout in most of the fights, but it was a decent undercard in a great fight where two guys, the number one guy versus the number one A versus number one B, went at it, and he put on a hell of a show. I can't say this about this fight, especially for a network that's supposed that a couple of years ago wouldn't stop bragging about boxing free on TV. Now they're on Fox. Before they were on CBS. Now they Showtime's they're somehow, I don't know what's going on with Showtime. I think they just, they're breaking Espinosa's heart over there, because I think he knows that it's only a matter of time where he goes underwater, just like HBO. But was this really worth the pay-per-view? Do you guys feel disappointed? Do you guys feel cheated? I don't know. I think even I'm at fault for some of this, because I really thought that Mikey was somehow going to be able to put rounds in the bank, and something was going to happen. Their head was going to clash, and somewhere along the line, Robert Garcia was going to come in and say, "Oh no, let's stop the fight. We're up on points. Let's go to the scorecards." That's not what happened. We saw a one-sided decision. Now, what does Mikey do? Do you guys still hold Mikey with high regards? Should we hold Mikey with high regards? Is he still favored to beat Spence? Does he rebuild his career again and go to 135, 140 pounds and try to find the best possible opponents? Who can Mikey fight at 135? Spence? At 140? The Rigaru? Whatever his name is? Maybe like a Chon Cepeda? Try to go for a welterweight WBC belt that I'm sure is going to be vacant next couple of fights by Ramirez, which is again a camp partner of Mikey Garcia. So what do you guys think, man? I want to know people's sentiment about this fight. I wasn't too fond of it. I know Mikey's always a fighter that's fought for himself, not for his public, as he should. But when you do these type of fights, people start looking out for themselves and not the fighter. You have to understand that. There's consequences and repercussions when it comes to this. When a fighter starts fighting for himself, the fan starts thinking for himself. The fan starts thinking, how is this going to benefit me from going to see a fight where a fighter's not going to throw his hands? He's not going to let his hands go. And that's what Mikey Garcia did. Yes, he dared to be great, but he sure didn't dare to throw. With that said, thank you guys for listening to the Mr. Boxing Guru podcast. Please do not forget to subscribe on iTunes. We're on Spotify. I do throw the podcast on YouTube as well. iCloud, I think, has it. We're working with iHeartRadio as well, so hopefully we get it on there. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. This has been the Mr. Boxing Guru podcast. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your week, guys. Bye-bye.